So just before we dive into our new series, I want to tell you about an upcoming series, church-wide series that we're going to be doing beginning the second week of October. It's called Everybody Always. How many of you guys, as you think about your life and you think about the people in your life, could use just maybe a little bit of help in learning how to love certain people in your personal world? Okay? This series is designed around teaching us how to love everybody. And when I say everybody, that means everybody, always. That's challenging, right? But that's what we're going to be doing. And the reason that we are going to be embracing this as a church and providing you opportunities to be in small groups, processing and reading a book that we're all going to be reading called Everybody Always, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Listening to the messages that will be aligned with that and being in small groups where we can process that material. And we hope that you will all participate because we really feel like as a part of the vision of this church that one of the key components of our vision is that love is central in all we do. And so if you would, I want to introduce you via video clip to a guy by the name of Bob Goff. 2 years ago, we did a church-wide study called Love Does. And this is his second book called Everybody Always. And we thought that this would be great for us as we move into the fall. So take a listen, and then I'm going to come back and share just a quick thing with you, and then we'll jump into the message. Okay?
Everybody, it's Bob Goff here, and I'm in the auditorium where I teach a class at a university. This class is on failure, and what we do is we just get a ton of students in here and get real about life. And it isn't always just this beautiful, awesome thing that happened. Man, my life, and perhaps yours as well, have been marked by a bunch of setbacks. I wrote a book called Everybody Always, and in this book I talk about how to love difficult people, how to love people when they failed and when we failed, but how to do it together instead of pointing bony fingers at each other, that we would engage one another and say, what do we do with that? And so my hope is that you'll take some of the study materials that we made in this little video course, and it's a kind of an adjunct to the book, and I hope that it'll prompt you to have some great conversations about when things were right, when things went wrong, and what you did about it, what you learned about your own faith. All right, you guys, thanks a million. I'll see you later.
So one of the things that I want you to really seriously consider thinking in your bulletin when you came in was this insert. And part of participating in our church-wide study is that you would make a commitment as often as you can to show up for 5 weeks, to hear the messages, to read the book, and we'll tell you more about the book later, and to participate in one of our small groups. I think it's one thing to hear something, to read something, to learn something, but I think it's altogether a different thing to really work something out with people in real-life situations. So I hope that you will seriously consider it. You will see that there are groups that we are providing every single day of the week. So there's no excuse like, I can only really do one on Wednesday. Well, we have a group on Wednesday, and Tuesday, and Monday, and Sunday. So any of the days of the week are covered. It's a 5-week thing. I like to tell people when it's short-term commitments, listen, we can do anything for a month or 5 weeks. Right? We can do anything for that period of time. Why is it so important that I am urging you to consider this? It's so important because love is central to our message. It's so central to who we are as a people of faith. And inevitably, there are going to be people in your life, and perhaps it's you, that are difficult. But we can't just give up on difficult people. Because love is the most powerful force in the universe, we have to continually apply it until that love breaks through and it actually changes people. And so I think this study is for all of us because we could use a little more love and we could stand to love others in our lives in a greater capacity without condition more than we do. So if you do, in thinking about this, want to participate, you'll fill out that insert, and on your way out in the Welcome Center area where the podium is, there'll be a little basket. You can just drop it in there. For the next month or so, we'll be giving you more information about it so that you can find out more and more. But if you think that that would be something that would have value for you, I hope that you will sign up, fill out that insert, and then drop it in the basket on the way out. Okay? All right. Well, we're in a new series beginning today called In Over My Head. And I find myself in this space more often than I would like to be. And I'm sure some of you do as well. In just a few moments, I'm going to introduce you to a character by the name of Jeremiah. Some of you guys know him, and for some, it'll be a brand new introduction. But first, I want to talk about what it means to really, over a period of time, when you find yourself in a difficult space, enduring that space with grace and hope and godly endurance. If I were to paint a picture, if I were to give you a snapshot that gave you the essence of grace and godly endurance, I would give you a picture of this lady here. For those of you who don't know her name is Paige Fisher, and she recently passed away. Yesterday we held a memorial service in her honor, and we celebrated and honored her life. She's one of the best people I've ever known. And as she began to battle her cancer over the course of this past year in particular, she had several seasons where she was battling cancer. In the last 6 months of her life, she was bedridden. And if you know her at all, you know that that was a very difficult thing because there was no moss that's going to grow on Paige Fisher. She was always actively engaged in doing good somewhere with somebody. And it was very, very difficult for her to, as it would be most of us, to lie in a bed and have our bodies waste away. For the most part, her mind was intact until the last few days. But every time I would go to visit her, I found myself being encouraged by her. And it just felt strange, even though I knew that's who she was and what she was about, when I would go to offer comfort or hope or faith, it seems that that is what she was offering to me. And I just couldn't help but think to myself, this is the kind of person that I want to be. I want to be the kind of person that when I am at my absolute worst, when things all around me are not as I would want them to be, and I am suffering, and I am tired, and I am weary, that I could still be at my best and encourage and bring hope and faith to other people. And that's what she did for me and so many others. And it just reminds me of this character that we're going to be studying over the next 5 weeks. His name is Jeremiah, and he's going to be given a task that he does not want to do. And it's going to last for a whole lot longer, the season of life, than he wants to be in. And yet somehow, some way, he is going to teach us something about how to endure with godly grace difficult seasons in our lives. I think this is a skill that many of us need. Because if you live long enough, you will find yourself thrust into spaces that you just don't want to be in. And you can't wish it or pray it away. Oftentimes when I was younger in my faith, I would just pray more fervently in the hopes that God would speed up the process, but it doesn't really work like that, sad to say. I think in these spaces there are reasons that we find ourselves there, and there are things for us to learn. And if we are tempted to push the fast forward button and get out of it, we will delay our time there because there is something for us in each of these seasons, whether or not we want to be there or not. And so as we begin, I want to invite you to join Jeremiah in these next 5 weeks and to learn from him, because I would imagine if you're not currently in one of these spaces, given enough time, you will find yourself in over your head. Now, if I were writing a book, I would never start this way, because it is so boring these first few verses. And it's the reason that most of us skip over chapters like this, because we just yawn and we're like, ugh. These words, these names, what in the world does it have to do with me? But I'm going to read these first few verses because I want you to understand what they actually do mean in the context of the larger story. So here's how it starts. These are the words of Jeremiah, son of Hilkiah, one of the priests from the town of Anathoth in the land of Benjamin. The Lord first gave messages to Jeremiah during the 13th year of the reign of Josiah, son of Ammon, king of Judah. The Lord's messages continued throughout the reign of King Jehoiakim, Josiah's son, until the 11th year of the reign of King Zedekiah, another of Josiah's son. In August of that 11th year, the people of Jerusalem were taken away as captives. It's a bit underwhelming, isn't it? So, what in the world does this have to do with anything? All right, so there are things we learn in these first 5 verses. What do we learn? What is Jeremiah's dad's name? Hilkiah. Okay. What is his occupation? He's a priest. Where does he live? He lives in Anathoth, which is just on the other side of the screen. I guess it didn't fit well. You'll have to take my word that it's about 3 miles northeast of Jerusalem. So it's a real place, right? What else did we learn? When did he begin hearing from God? So it gives you the date and it gives you the name of the king, but just so you understand, he began hearing from God. He was about 18 or 19 years old. The text doesn't give you that. He's a very young man, okay? And when he starts hearing from God, it's about 625 BC. We know that because of the dates of the kings that are given here. And as you hear one king after another king, if you took the time to put it together, you would realize that the time that he's going to hear from God and that he's going to prophesy to the people is going to be over a term of about 40 years. So this takes us, if we were looking at all the kings that he prophesied to the nation of Israel during, this takes us back to the Carter administration. And Reagan, and Bush, and Clinton, and Bush, and Obama, and Trump. That's how long he was speaking to this group of people. So he's going to be thrust into a position at the age of 18 or 19 for a period of about 40 years where he is going to be prophesying. At the very end, we learn a very important point in the story. What do we learn in the last verse? That the people are going to be what? They're going to be taken away as captives. We don't learn this immediately, but what we will learn is that in 586 BC, the Babylonian kingdom will sweep down from the north. They will come into Jerusalem. They will level it and destroy it. And all of the people who survive the onslaught, they will be shipped out into other lands. They will be deported. They will be exiled. And there will be no one who lives there anymore. Okay? The story is not going to have a happy ending. So that sets the stage for what you're about to hear as God gives his first words to Jeremiah at about age 18. So think about it, guys. It's right in your age range that God would come and say some of these things to you. Verse 4, the Lord gave me this message. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart, and I appointed you as my prophet to the nations. O sovereign Lord, I said, I can't speak for you. I am too young. So does that sound familiar to anybody at all, the very first part? What does that sound familiar to you by? Psalm 139 is what sounds familiar to me. Listen to this in Psalm 139. The psalmist writes, "You made all the delicate inner parts of my body, and you knit me. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God." So is it possible that God knows us all in that way? The psalmist writes about it. God communicates it to Jeremiah. Is it just to a special few, or is it to all of us that God knows in that way? That there actually is a purpose and a plan for every single one of our lives, that God sees us and He knows us, and that He has good things in store for us, that He has a purpose and a plan. I can't help but be reminded of that psalm as I read this text. Now, as he hears this, his response isn't encouragement. He doesn't think, "Oh, that's so awesome. You knew me before I was ever born. You have great plans for me." His first response is what? "You got the wrong dude. I am not he. You have these great plans for me. It must be somebody else, but it can't be me. Why? I'm too young. I can't speak well." And how do you think God's going to deal with these excuses? Probably like He deals with your excuses. He's not going to tolerate them, because why? Why? He knows you. He made you. He set you apart for the purpose to which He's called you. And even if you can't yet see it and understand that you have something great in store, that you have it within you to accomplish, God does. So listen to what God says in response. The Lord replied, "Don't say that I'm too young, for you must go wherever I send you and say whatever I tell you. Don't be afraid of the people, for I will be with you, and I will protect you. I, the Lord, have spoken." Then the Lord reached out and touched my mouth and said, "Look, I have put my words in your mouth. Today I appoint you to stand up against nations and kingdoms. Some of you must uproot and tear down, destroy and overthrow, and others you must build up and plant." Why do you think He tells Jeremiah not to be afraid? Because he's deathly afraid. And he has good reason. As we unfold his story, what you will find is that Jeremiah's friends are going to turn on him, all of them. His family is going to forsake him. They're going to disown him. He's going to get beaten up. He's going to get put in stocks in the public square. He's going to get thrown into a vat of slime up to his armpits. He's going to be threatened at every turn. Countless people will try to kill him. You think he has reason to be afraid? He has no idea what's coming, but he's still afraid, and he should be. His fears are well-founded. And I think at this point in our story, one of the things that I think is important for us to realize is that when God makes a promise, it is significant what He tells us. Because there are a lot of times where we sense God saying something to us or prompting us or giving us something either through His Word or through someone else that we just feel sure about. But then at the first sign that something is wrong, we question the promise. We wonder, how in the world could you do this? You told me this, but now this. Right? And we get upset. And we get disappointed. And we get frustrated. And we turn away, believing that God isn't going to stay true to His promise. But the truth of the matter is, when God makes a promise, God always keeps His promise. And what is His promise to Jeremiah in verse 6? He says, "Do not be afraid of the people, for I will be with you, and I will protect you." From what? He doesn't really say. He doesn't say what he's going to protect him from. What he says is, I've got a job for you for the next 40 years, and you just need to know that I, through all of it, am going to be with you. We will accomplish this task. Does that mean bad stuff's not going to happen? Nope. Does that there are going to be seasons where you wonder what in the world you said to me or call me to? Nope. See, I think there's a difference between God promising us something and God providing for us and it not being in the way that we thought it might. God says, I will protect you. But He doesn't say there aren't things that aren't going to come along and that are going to rock our worlds. Because Jeremiah's world is going to be rocked. And there are going to be times that he has total meltdowns. He will not respond in ways that look like godly grace and endurance. He will lose it. And there's stuff to learn from there. But in his response to God, he is honest. I think that's one of the foundation pieces from the very beginning that you and I need to understand. That when we're walking with God and God is talking to us and guiding us, there are sometimes when we hit spaces that we just need to be honest with God and not pretend that our situation is anything other than what it is. Hellish. And we don't want to be there, and we want to get out as soon as we can. And sometimes we think even God has tricked us. That's what Jeremiah will think. For God to be with us is all that we need to know in this space right here in chapter 1. God says to Jeremiah, no matter what comes your way, I will be with you. Does it mean that there won't be hardship? No. Does it mean that there won't be difficulty? No. Does it mean that there won't be trial? No. So I just want you in the space that some of you guys are in just to understand if things aren't the way you wanted them to be, it doesn't necessarily mean that God's given up on His promise to you. To understand that God is with you is the most important thing that you need to know, and it will help you navigate the spaces in front of you in the days to come. It's when you believe that He is not true to His word and you give up on God and you turn away that will begin your journey of miring down into a place that you never wanted to be in and staying there longer than you actually wanted to. God has a plan and a purpose for why you are where you are. Know that He is with you. The story continues. Now, as we look at this story, there are going to be two images that He gives to Jeremiah from verses 11 through verses 16. He's going to give the image of a branch from an almond tree, and He's going to give him the image of a pot of boiling water. And what these images are is they tell us about why the judgment is coming and who the judgment is coming from. You need to understand that when God has set apart Jeremiah to call and give message to this group of people, that for decade after decade after decade, they have participated in two primary actions that has put God in a place where He just said, I can't take it anymore. When I look at this, it is so detestable in my sight, and I just have to call a timeout and say, this can no longer continue. Now, two of those things, as he talks about in verses 11 through 16, the first thing is that this group of people have continually taken advantage of the widows, the orphans, the defenseless, those who cannot protect themselves. In fact, during King Manasseh's reign, which was a 55-year reign, there was a sort of a statement that everyone was familiar with where it was said that the blood of the innocents was poured out from one end of the city to the other. So you could imagine if that were the picture or if that were the case, how cruel and how graphic and how vile it was that this group of people who were in charge were bullied who couldn't help themselves. And God just says, I've had enough. I cannot take this anymore. And this is why Jesus is coming to this group of people. The second particular thing that they were dealing with was idolatry. That means they were carving images, creating their own gods, and drawing from that their identity, their security, and their comfort. Whenever I read the Bible, or at least when I used to read the Bible, I used to think, how could they make this little bird, or make this goat, or make this cow, and then fall down and worship it? It didn't make sense to me until I thought really about how we do the same things. I mean, change the images, change the idols, but aren't there other things apart from God's presence in your life that you draw identity and security and comfort from over and above God's presence in your life? If it's the latest fashion, or the latest automobile, or the house that we live in, or the car that we drive, or the money that we have or we don't, we place a lot of our identity and our security and comfort in the possessions of things that we have or don't have. Because we think, well, if I just have this, then, right? Fill in the blank. All of the things that we're striving after, if we put them ahead of God's place in our lives, God calls it idolatry. It means we are trusting in something or someone else to give us what only God can give us. And for decade after decade after decade, when He told them, commandment number 1, right? Thou shalt have no other gods before me. God says to Jeremiah, this has just gone on too long. They're treating the defenseless horribly. They're worshiping other gods, and there's judgment that's going to come, and you're going to tell them about it. Now, if they hear your voice and listen to your message and turn around and change their behaviors, judgment will be averted. But if they don't, they just need to know the cliff is coming. And then he continues on, and he says, so I want you to get up and prepare for action. I want you to tell them everything I tell you to say. Do not be afraid of them, or I will make you look foolish in front of them. For you see, today I have made you strong, like a fortified city that cannot be captured, like an iron pillar or a bronze wall. You will stand against the whole land, the kings, officials, priests, and people of Judah. They will fight you, but they will fail, for I am with you, and I will take care of you. I, the Lord, have spoken. What did you hear in that? If you're hearing that, what did you hear? Are you nervous, or are you comforted, or are you both? I wished he wouldn't have put that part in there where he says to him, do not be afraid of them, or I will make you look foolish. I don't like that part. And then he says, they will fight you. The they will fail part is okay. But I don't know that I'm up for a fight. If you're going to give me a hard message, just let me go in and say the message and leave. I don't really want to wrestle with people about stuff I'm telling them that they don't want to do, right? So he's in a really, really, really hard space, right? Can you imagine that he might be afraid? Let me just ask you, anybody been afraid once or twice in your life? Right, so when you're afraid, what does fear do to your life? What does it do, typically, to you? It cripples or it paralyzes you from taking an action, right? So it also steals your joy. I've never met anybody who, where fear is really operating in their life on a high level, that they were joyful people. It totally just robs you of joy. What else does it rob you of? Certainly it robs you of courage. It paralyzes you, right? How about peace? Just having peace of mind when you lay down and you put your head on your pillow at the end of the day. If you're dealing with fear, I bet you don't sleep well. Is that true? Fear will steal your peace. It will steal your joy. It will rob you of all good that God has for you. And he's in a place where I believe he is paralyzed by this. He does not want, he's 18 years old. And he's got to go up against kings and those in authority and in positions of power. Can you envision what it must be like to hear this? But who's he hearing it from? He's hearing it from God, so he's a bit caught in between because he's like God and the king, God and the king and the people who are going to fight me, right? So he's just in a very, very rock and a hard place, right? Very difficult space. And so I would imagine that probably there are some of us who could stand to be liberated from some of our fears that we have today. I bet there are some people whose joy is being stolen, whose peace is being stolen. You're just not living your best life. Your life is not in a good space, but you're not at your best. When I hear the word of the Lord say, they will fight you, your enemies, your opposition, they will fight against you, but they will fail. For I am with you. I will take care of you. I, the Lord, have spoken. Would you stand with me? I want you to think about this promise of God for you. I want you to apply it in the situation that you find yourself today. You may have opposition in your life. You may have real enemies that threaten your peace and your joy. Right now you find yourself in a situation that you'd rather not be in, and you're there longer than you ever thought you would be. And it's really doing something to you. And I just want you to understand two things before we close. Number one, it's not only okay, it's right to be honest with God about how you feel. I think when we start posing and faking with God about how we feel and over-spiritualizing stuff, I think it's just garbage. It doesn't help. So I think there's where Jeremiah teaches us, you know what? I can be honest about how I am with you, even if I don't want what you want for me. God's okay with that. In fact, God's probably about the only one who is okay with our stuff. So that's the place that we can take it. Rather than turn out and away from God, we turn towards and we open up. It's the beginning of our healing. So we can be honest. But the second part is there's a promise for us here in the space of our fears. In the spaces, in the places that we don't want to be. And the promise is behind me. The promise is they will fight you, your enemies, those who oppose you, that which is against you, but they will fail, for I am with you, and I will take care of you. I, the Lord, have spoken. So I want you with me to read that together, okay? Start us, Janae.
They will
Fight you, they will fail, for I am with you, and I will take care of you. I, the Lord, has spoken. So I want you to rest in that for just a second. We're going to say it one more time, just in case you didn't hear it. This is not just for Jeremiah. This is for you. And I want you to hold on to this, because even though this is about 2,600 years old, this is a promise in the Word of God for people that He's known since before they were born, who He had a plan, who He saw and knew even tough times came. This is an expression of faith when we receive that. The one thing that really, really spoke to me about my friend Paige Fisher is that in the hard spaces of her life, she actually applied her faith. Most of us know far more than we ever plan on applying to our lives. At some point, our belief has to turn to trust. At some point, there has to be faith that is extended in a God who has known us since before we were born and who has a plan for our lives, even if we've royally screwed it up. Let's say it one more time. They will fight you, but they will fail. For I am with you, and I will take care of you. I, the Lord, have spoken. So one of the things I want you to do as you think about this, I want you to remember where this passage is, maybe even write it down. I want you to put it in a place this week, in the mirror in your bathroom or someplace in your pocket. I want you to see this, and every day I want you to remind yourself of this promise for you. And I want you to let it encourage you in the spaces where your joy is being stolen and your peace is being stolen. And I want you to help it right-size you in the midst of whatever storm you may find yourself in. And if you're not in a place where that applies to you, there's a good chance that someday you will. So keep this verse handy and let it apply to you as you move forward. We're going to learn some stuff from Jeremiah, and hopefully by the end, when we find ourselves in places over our head where we understand that everything about us is against us, that there's going to be an opportunity for us to grow and to become the people God knew that we could be when He first said yes to our existence. Amen?
Amen.
Okay, God bless you guys. Be people of grace and peace.